Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Tuesday, August 11th, 2026, episode 570. And I'm just going to talk about a movie, of course, Enemy Mine, which came out in 1985. So basically, I've been in kind of a cloud because of my cold in the middle of summer. But nevertheless, an idea came to me, so I thought I'd talk about it. Anyway, Enemy Mine was a movie out of 1985, which had Louis Gossett Jr. and Dennis Quaid. It's kind of a hokey, I guess, campy would be a movie, would be a description that people would make when it comes to movies such as this. It's science fiction, and Louis Gossett Jr. is playing uh, an alien, so he's dressed up in a costume. And I'm sure there's behind the scenes um, interviews where he talks about how the suit was just so uncomfortable and awful to be in. But anyway, it falls in line with that. I made episodes on Joyeux Noël, which is about the Christmas peace in World War One. Talked about All Quiet on the Western Front. I've talked about other movies as well, and how, perhaps it might make portray me as some kind of idealistic hippie, because that's pretty much what it's like. But maybe there's a greater lesson here. As you know, I've said it before, any good war movie, whether it's sci-fi or historical, is an anti-war movie. And I've even made the case that Homer's Iliad is also an anti-war narrative, but that's for another episode, I guess. But so the lesson here is that the perspective that you have, the understanding that you have, which comes from that perspective, might be a bad one, might be one of the worst ones that you could have about an issue, a phenomena. And so you need to get other perspectives. If we were to draw a parallel, it's like you have a problem, so you ask other people for advice. What you're actually doing is finding other perspectives, how other people might see it, therefore come to different conclusions or to different solutions that will help you get out of it. And people who resist listening to other people, it's because they want to preserve their perspective. Listening to other people's opinions and proposals for solutions often will involve changing what you think you already know. And a lot of people can't get rid of that, can't let go. And so they would prefer to maintain their problem, uh, while at the same time complain about it and claim that they want to get out of those problems. But anyway, so that's just a take on problems. But our current problem is this war, which no one really wanted. Well, very few people, the majority of people in the United States did not want. Most, I would argue, don't even know about it. So, there's that. Why do we have to be subjected to this kind of policy, suffer, when most people don't care? They don't care enough about it to even do any research on it. So one's perspective might be a bad one, unproductive one, a valueless one, a negative value creating one. And so you need to get other perspectives. Now, the goal of propaganda is to erase other perspectives, to erase even the possibility that there are other perspectives. And it's funny because, well, funny in a dark way, because postmodernism, which is used by a lot of intellectuals, functions a lot like propaganda, right? So all of these, particularly critical thinking, Marxist professors, they like to think that they are being super intellectual. They're super smart because they're using postmodernism, exposing the oppressive nature of a lot of the traditional ideology. Look at all the people who were oppressed, who suffered under the previous ideology. And so they want to blow that up so they can champion their own uh, subjectivity. However, it's just all propaganda, because because postmodernism is supposed to expose subjectivity in order to access other perspectives, not just one other, but all of the other ones. So it's not an exercise in trying to find the right one, which is what a lot of professors have turned it into, like their woke agenda, for example. But the real goal, it seems to me, what it should have been used for, whether it was the original intent or not, is for people to share ideas. That's my take. And I think originally that's what happened. I'm not talking about Foucault, but I'm talking about Habermas, people like that. I got the sense that it was more about sharing ideas, having better ideas, what would be a better take, and maybe even resolve a lot of the violence that comes from the authorities or authoritarians being threatened. So, what happens instead, especially when this idea of presenting a narrow subjectivity to the general public, uh, when it is consumed without any kind of doubt or suspicion, ultimately the result is brutal war. Lots of violence, lots of hate, negative behavior. There's a lot of dehumanizing of the other. You can see this on the individual level. You can see it on the national level when we're talking about a global conflict. But there's a lot of dehumanizing and ultimately a tremendous amount of violence. And when the violence does take place, people don't feel remorse. They don't feel guilt that they just supported an action which resulted in the death of a lot of people who are just like us, who don't care, who had no idea what was going on, but now they're dead. Um, and so this is actually a blast against postmodernist so-called professors who try to protect their sacred belief in the face of obviously bigger problems, right? So we're living in this era of war and whatnot, but they're still talking about their, relatively speaking, trivial matters in their local community. In other words, in order they fear exposing their own subjectivity uh, as a trivial issue. So you have to sort of portray everything else in a particular way so that it actually maintains whatever it is that you believe. So a lot of the Palestine activists, who stand against Israel, they don't quite understand, or like a lot of people who just don't like all of the killing. Some people, and many people, and I think myself, have gone on to even call it a genocide, right? So the genocidal aspect of it is less important as reshaping it in order to fit their own subjectivity of some sort of LGBTQ woke agenda that they have here. So uh, there's no excuse for this type of behavior in the age of the internet. There's no excuse to be clueless today, but most people are because of the dollar privilege, which is coming to an end, a crashing end. Like you go to a lot of these oppressed countries, and maybe younger people who haven't done a lot of talking, they don't know about the larger issues, but most people do sense that, and therefore have a curiosity as to why things are the way they are. And unfortunately, a lot of their instructors are only seeing it from a narrow subjectivity as well. And yeah, ultimately, all roads lead to the United States, that the United States is the one that is at fault, is responsible for all of the suffering that's going on in the world. And that's unfortunate. So, uh, on the other hand, I strive to listen to the other side, to opposition, to hear anything, just to know at least what people are thinking. So when I listen to other professors, I'm only listening to specifics, so that if I ever have to argue with them or against them, I kind of know what to expect and kind of know how I would handle it. So there are no surprises. So one must or should, and strongly encourage, it is advisable to listen to the so-called enemy, the opposition, to know what they're up to know how they think, to know where they're headed. It's more information is good. But it's crazy that the majority of the non-bureaucratic United States doesn't do this at all. It shows that most people in the United States are heavily, heavily propagandized. So much so that even after, uh, you know, visible, high-profile spokesmen are exposed as liars, like Fauci, people keep believing the propaganda. People keep defending even the liars. It's just crazy to witness. And it's like the Matrix. People are like the movie Matrix. People are not ready to be unplugged. People are not ready to hear the truth. They can't handle it. It's just too much for their brain because they've been allowed to live in this small subjectivity, this very narrow subjectivity, which made sense to them, right? I just saw a clip of basically people who are on welfare, and their subjectivity is even narrower. And so, can you imagine what would happen if all of a sudden welfare checks stopped? Like, it's just going to be nuts because it's going to happen either gradually or all at once, but it's going to happen, especially since the United States is heading towards economic ruin, maybe. So one example of someone I listen to, primarily because he pops up on all the podcasts that I listen to, is Seyed Marandi, who's a professor in Tehran University and former advisor of Iran's nuclear negotiation team. But he seems very, very plugged in to what's going on in Iran, what people in the government in Iran are thinking, etc. And it's probably because he still knows a lot of people in the government, although he himself is not, involved. I'm surprised that he's still alive, that people haven't targeted him yet, because that's what they like to do. Anyone who speaks truth, exposes lies and propaganda, they're usually top on the list of assassination squads. So I'm surprised that he's still alive, but maybe he understands that as well and has taken precautions. I don't know. I hope he did, but just for the sake of humanity. But anyway, so if you listen to what he has to say, he will describe Trump as going through a self-imposed humiliation ritual. That's what I heard him say last night. So he says, "Oh, there's going to be peace," and then he bombs, and then he says, "Oh, well, uh, makes some sort of apology, and then not apology, but concession, and says, "Oh, well, we destroyed them, and now we have to attack them again." And none of it makes any sense. And so maybe to him, he believes that he's being so slick and so smooth that if he keeps saying something over and over again, it'll be true. But of course, from the Iranian perspective, it's much different. It looks very different. And so, what I'm basically trying to say is that if Saeed Marandi, who is a professor over in Iran and a high profile figure, interviewed by both Iranians and people in the West, well, then a lot of people in Iran and also in the Middle East are aware of the very same things. In other words, he's saying a lot of the things which I've also reported to you, shared with you based on what I've heard, that is not propaganda perspectives. So Iranians listen to many different perspectives as well. In addition to listening to Fox, MSNBC, read the Wall Street Journal, they read and hear everything. They have to because they have to figure out what their enemy is going to do next. At the same time, they realize what most Americans are consuming, what they're listening to, what they're believing, what they're willing to go along with, and imagine what their opinion of people in the West uh, is. It's not a very nice one. I said my son had come back from Europe, and he said that he was surprised at how poorly they were treated And we just made the observation that it might be that there are a lot of people who are very, very upset with America and so are treating Americans very, very poorly. But it also could be because they're college age students, and so it's possible that they were just being extremely obnoxious. But in any case, so they know what politicians, bureaucrats are saying over here. They also know all of the statistics, all of the projections on ammunition and capabilities and potential damage. In addition to knowing American manufacturing statistics, they also know what they did to American forces. How many lives were taken, how many people were probably injured, etc. In other words, although there is a news blackout here in the United States, Israel, and other parts of the Middle East, they have access to Chinese information networks. And so they probably have accurate assessment of how much damage was done, the potential of casualties, etc. So while we're living under a rock over here, I think the information is flowing much more easily over in the Middle East. So they know that all of the peace deals, the MOUs, uh, are all strategies just to rearm and try to hit again in the face of ammo shortages. They know that people in the West have no ability to defend against missiles, and they know that there's no strategy, there's no flexibility, there's no creativity in the strategy, as I mentioned in episode 564. I mean, this is the time and era of information. So while most Americans are limiting their information consumption to what they prefer, other people, particularly those people suffering under Western hegemony, they're not limiting themselves. And so, in a way, people in the West are living in a self-imposed censorship, right? So there's the top-down censorship, which of course exists, but Americans, a lot of Westerners, impose a censorship on themselves. They refuse to listen to other subjective perspectives, which is kind of crazy. And all at the time when it is so easy to get around it. I mean, we have podcasters, big name, former investigative journalist type podcasting going on today. So it is very easy to get around the censorship. And it's not yet illegal to share one's views like I am right now. But eventually, you will see that the censorship will happen in different ways, right? They'll get you on other things like tax evasion or um, tax fraud or something of that nature. And so the whole flock camera, digital surveillance, all of this stuff, which is being claimed to be for our safety and protection, is really going to be used for intimidation and censorship. So also add to that that India already uh, started a digital CBDC, digital rupee in 2022. And it's a signal that that's eventually what we're going to have here in the United States. And I don't know. I'm hoping that the government collapses before then, so we never have to see it. But who knows? The deep state is pretty deep. Do we really want to be run and governed by idiots like this, people who have a narrow-minded subjectivity? Like my Foils War episode, the everyday person has a lot of other things to worry about. Yesterday, I talked about the $20 burrito. So, I'm actually okay with the fact that most Americans are completely clueless about even basic things like what 1776 was all about. But it's their ability to vote that I have a problem with, right? People who are this clueless yet have the ability to vote is what's so troublesome. I'd be in favor of having restrictions on voting, like only tax-paying people can vote, which means that all bureaucrats, everyone who receives a government paycheck, are not allowed to vote, right? How is that even not considered a conflict of interest? This is just, it's so crazy. It's like, what do they say? Putting the fox in charge of the hen house, right? It's not, it's not the way to do things. And all this while we're living in the age of the internet, where information is at people's fingertips, but they refuse to even lift a finger or spend even a moment to try to listen to another perspective. Why do I push this so hard? Because with a bit of self-awareness made possible by hearing other perspectives, you should be ashamed, right? The first motion that you feel is shame. That's what I felt when I heard another perspective, because I would go on and on about whatever I thought was true, some stupid uh, take on an issue, and then someone else would say something, and I was so embarrassed. I'd be like, "Oh, well." And it only has to happen one or two times. Like the first time you think, well, it was just that one time. But when it keeps happening, then you realize that your subjectivity, whatever it is that you're seeing, how you're seeing it is flawed. It's extremely problematic. So then you seek out other perspectives. And the problem is that Americans are so deep in the darkness that even after losing war after war after war, they believe that Ukraine or the war against Iran will be another victory. Another victory? Hello? There are no other victories. That's what's extremely crazy about the propaganda that we live under. Also, even if the US does wake up and start hearing other subjectivities and realize just how wrong this country has been, one still has to deal with all of the pain and suffering and anger of people who lost loved ones in other countries. Now, I was listening to someone, I think he was, I forget who I was listening to, but he mentioned how a lot of the people fighting in Ukraine are not Ukrainians. They're from Colombia and Brazil. These are just mercenaries who are being paid to go over there. And the number of people signing up is getting lower and lower because obviously, why would you sign up and you while thinking you're going to get rich, but you're just going to get over to Ukraine and just die right away. So, even after everything ends, what about all that anger? Like the parents of the kids who were killed in that little school, the girls' school, at the beginning of the war with Iran. And then for Trump to be asked about it, for Trump to just dismiss it so casually, insensitively, it's wild. But on the world stage, we have to realize, we could just shrug our shoulders and say, well, so what? Big deal. No, on the world stage, it is embarrassing. It is so ruining the image and perception that people have of Americans and the United States. And I'm not talking about all the illegals that are coming into the country. They don't care. They just see the welfare. But people outside of the United States see. Uh, are doing racialization. They're generalizing all Americans as being like Donald Trump. I mean, how else is the entire country going to go along with this if they're not as narrow-minded as Trump? So, to me, for me, I see this wider subjectivity, and it is extremely deeply embarrassing. And I know that there's a price that's going to be paid for it in the near future. And I say that because everything that we're living under is unsustainable. It will come to an end. But then the question is, what comes next? And that's why I'm doing this podcast in part, not just for my kids and descendants, but also so that anyone who does listen to this makes a push for freedom, tries to make the case for freedom, so that other people, when everything goes sideways or goes backwards, that we remember that through freedom, through the sharing of ideas, through creativity and the willingness to admit that one is wrong because life will be better if we do, that this would be the way to go. That's it for this episode. I'll talk to you next time.